I'm Joyce Nuta, an associate professor at the University of Central Florida. My area of specialization is English for Speakers of Other Languages education, and I have worked in the area of infusing teacher education curricula with English for Speakers of Other Languages, or ESOL, content since 1997 in a number of different states. I'm joined today by Corinne Strabel, who is a doctoral student at the University of Central Florida in instructional technology and second language acquisition. And she has been working also for a number of years in a number of different states on helping institutions ensure that they prepare their teachers to work with English language learners. Today we are going to be talking about ESOL Infusion, and we'll begin by a definition of infusion and then a brief description of what type of promise that infusion holds for teacher educators. After that, we will look at specifically what competencies that future teachers of English language learners, meaning general teachers who have English language learners in their first grade, fifth grade, 10th grade classroom. And we'll look at a couple different possibilities for competencies to include in the curriculum. We also will then move on to looking at which professionals work with English language learners, which programs should infuse elements regarding English language learners, and what the process looks like when a curriculum is updated and refreshed to be more inclusive of the needs of English language learners. We begin with looking at exactly what ESOL infusion is, and just by the term infusion, we mean that the essence of what is important in working with students who are learning English as they are learning academic content is embedded into the regular teacher education curriculum, so that as they are learning about how to teach math to all students, they also learn what specifically is different about teaching math to English language learners. What areas need additional emphasis, what particular operations may be more difficult because of language issues. So it's extremely important that these competencies regarding working with English language learners are contextualized within the broader teacher education curriculum. And we also want to see that these competencies are integrated in both an explicit and a seamless way, so that they make sense with the content of the curriculum as is. Again, looking at another example of perhaps educational psychology courses or human development courses that are common elements among teacher education programs. To infuse appropriately ESOL content, it would have to have a very strong connection to the content of that course, and we look at how exactly to go about identifying potential matches for existing content and the additional ESOL content that will connect to it. We also want to be sure that when we infuse a teacher education program, that we have a balance between that embedded content that I just mentioned and at least one or more experiences where students learn about English language learners as a standalone or specific module or course, so that they have a blend between this diffuse content that's embedded and a more in-depth picture of how to teach ELLs, which would be taught by an actual specialist in ESOL or second language acquisition. Infusion also has a number of requirements for it to work, and one of them is the institution's commitment that all teachers have adequate preparation in fostering the academic success of English language learners. So departing from that principle, we attempt to ensure that across the curriculum, every opportunity that is there is taken advantage of to make these connections between how to educate all students, and then specifically what areas in addition need to be emphasized for English language learners. And often we talk about infusion, although the metaphor deals with tea, infusing tea leaves in water, that almost is an inappropriate metaphor in that some of the essence becomes clouded or lost in the process, and the distinct nature of the content that has been added perhaps is transparent. We want this to be more like a tapestry where everything is connected, but yet we can see those individual fibers, which are the content of the existing curriculum interlinked with the content of the ESOL and second language acquisition issues. Now, the ESOL infusion process holds a lot of promise, and that's why it's worth the effort to explore whether it can be done at any teacher education institution. The promise that it holds is that every educator who graduates from the program will be prepared from day one to work with English language learners and to give them the kind of support that they need to succeed so that they can move more quickly through the second language acquisition process and learn content as effectively and efficiently as possible. So it holds great promise in that respect. And in concert with ESOL specialists, who are an important ingredient in the success of these students at school, we want to see a partnership, a collaboration between the specialists and well-informed generalist teachers who are able to back up what the specialists can do with the ESOL students in the various types of teaching situations that they might be working with them, and vice versa, that the specialist can back up what the classroom teacher is working on as well. We hope that the outcome of infusion is that every graduate will have an equal and deep commitment to ensuring that our English language learners are successful, and that they will do everything within their knowledge and skills possible to give them that opportunity. So we hope to foster that kind of a commitment in those students. And also a benefit is that our students can see in the infusion that we accomplish in teacher education programs a model of collaboration as our ESOL faculty collaborate with other teacher education faculty, and we work with each other's courses, we provide content for each other's courses, we link assignments and find ways to make everything connect for our students. We provide a model for them to collaborate at their schools with other educators at their school sites, as well as working with the ESOL specialists who concentrate on the needs of English language learners. One of the first instincts that institutions have when they consider the process of infusing is to ask, well, what standards do we have to meet, and how do we go about meeting them? And we are going to talk in depth about the process and a few caveats of pitfalls that can occur when the process is entirely standards driven. But given those warnings about potential pitfalls, the most important place to start is determining what kind of outcomes we want to see in the infused curriculum. Are we trying to prepare our teachers for particular credential? Different states have different requirements for endorsements or certificates. Even for the mainstream generalist teacher who has English language learners in class rather than the specialists. Do we want to have these options be stackable so that as students go through the process of learning as a generalist how to deal with English language learners, if they get very excited about working with English language learners, is there an option for them to go on for certification? So initially it's important to have discussions with the faculty, with the administration about where the institution would like to go, what options the institution would like to make available to students. One way to begin when examining a teacher education curriculum is to look at the TESOL NCATE P through 12 teacher education standards in ESOL. And although these are intended primarily for specialists who will work with English language learners, they have many competencies that all teacher candidates need to be familiar with, and they go in depth for those who may choose to specialize in TESOL. They consist of 5 areas: language, which of course is a major concern for working with English language learners, understanding the nature of language, understanding the nature of the second language acquisition process, and what students are capable of comprehending and expressing at any point across the continuum of becoming proficient in the second language. Also, they focus on culture and the role of culture in students' success at school. An area that is very comprehensive is planning, implementing, and managing instruction. So the types of differentiation that need to be brought into instruction related to English language learners at different levels of proficiency with different literacy levels and varying needs. Connected, of course, with planning and implementing and managing instruction is the area of assessment, which is the 4th area, and what types of informal assessments can be used for students who are at beginning stages of language proficiency, what kinds of accommodations can be made both in the classroom and in formal testing situations. All of these are critical issues that teacher candidates need to be familiar with. And lastly, professionalism and the need to keep oneself apprised of the latest research and best practices in the field. In addition to the national TESOL NCATE standards, there are state standards related to TESOL. Many states have standards, again, focused on specialists, but depending on what state teacher education institution is in, it would be important to also look at the state standards and glean from them what would be useful to include in the general teacher education curriculum. A recent publication that was put out by the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition gives us some guidance for generalist teachers who do not specialize in TESOL, but it provides a good overview of what the generalist K through 12 teacher who has 1 or more ELLs in the classroom should know and be able to do. And the 5 areas that they've selected overlap in many ways with the TESOL standards, but they don't go into the depth that the TESOL standards do, which are again intended for specialists. The 5 areas of the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisitions proposed teacher competencies are language acquisition and communicative competence, similar to the language area in TESOL. Again, looking at the process of second language acquisition, understanding where students are in that continuum, and how to help them develop communicative competence. The second area is curriculum and instruction, and the types of modifications that need to be made, the types of enhancements that need to be made to better address the needs of English language learners. The third area, again very connected to curriculum and instruction, is assessment and accommodations. The fourth area is culture and education. And lastly, the fifth area is school and home communities. So how the connections can be made between the school and the home communities so that English language learners can receive the support of the community in their learning, and the many resources that are in the community can be brought into the schools to help not only educate ELLs, but to enrich the curriculum for all students.
When a teacher education program starts to look at ESOL Infusion and considers either the state standards or the competencies that Dr. Nuta just discussed, it is important to take a quick step back and actually consider who works with the English language learners in the schools and also in the communities. First of all, we have the classroom teachers, which I will get to in just a moment, but there is a group of pivotal roles that are being filled in schools by non-instructional personnel. That, of course, would first of all be a principal, assistant principal, maybe a dean of discipline. We also have speech pathologists or counselors, school counselors, and guidance counselors who work with those ELLs, not necessarily on a daily basis, but who step in at specific times when the ESOL student needs those kinds of services. So those personnel need a little bit more in their coursework that prepares them for working with those English language learners. The second portion, of course, when we start moving towards the instructional personnel is, first of all, a content teacher. Content teachers obviously work with the discipline that the student needs to work in the academic area. But more and more, we know that content teachers also help students develop the academic language. And in second language acquisition, we do make this differentiation between the basic interpersonal communication skills or social language, as opposed to the cognitive academic language proficiency, the type of language and higher order thinking that students need to learn to express and take in a content course. We, of course, also have the language arts teachers who, very much like the content teacher, has a specific area of expertise and works with the students to develop that kind of language. But at the same time, when it comes to reading and comprehension, developing reading fluency and also working with writing, that is another very specific skill that students need to develop, and for second language learners that approach is different than for a native English speaker. And then the last category is definitely the ESOL specialist, the one that works with the students on language development. Sometimes English language learners are working in a shelter classroom with an ESOL specialist, or they may be in a newcomer school where for a year or two they really work on developing those language skills until they are coming into a mainstream classroom. And as Dr. Nuta mentioned earlier, it is pivotal that there is a partnership between the mainstream classroom teacher who has the content knowledge and then that ESOL specialist who has in-depth knowledge of second language acquisition and the development of the language skills that are necessary for our English language learners to be successful in all academic areas. Now that we have considered who the people are who work with the English language learner, we can take a closer look at what a teacher education program would consider, first of all, as they're putting ESOL Infusion together. We have come up with a graphic, which you will be seeing on the screen little by little, in different kinds of steps, and we thought it would be appropriate to make it look like a schoolhouse. At the very basic, you see a foundation, and we decided to call this a basic coverage. It is something that is done in all programs, whether it is for instructional or non-instructional personnel, and we look at ESOL Infusion there with the 1+, 2+, 3+ framework. You will in a few minutes learn in more detail what that actually entails. However, what I'd like to point out here is the basic coverage is really an updating of the current curriculum in a teacher education program. By that, I mean looking at infusing ESOL content into an existing course. So for example, in a educational foundations kinds of course where you're looking at learning styles, maybe classroom management, considering the cultural aspects of a second language learner and how that might impact the kind of behavior that a teacher would see in classroom. Maybe an expectation even of the family members of the roles of a teacher or discipline issues that may arise in that situation. It could also be for a speech pathologist, just the kinds of things, starting to learn about what is different about a second language learner and how some things when a student is referred to them potentially is not a speech pathology issue, but is really a second language acquisition issue. So it is at the basic coverage, at that basic level of ESOL Infusion, we're really looking at updating the curriculum and enhancing what is already in place. The next level you see with the ESOL Credential 1, and we're looking at that point at the content teachers to which I referred earlier. They are the ones who are in the classroom, in the trenches at all times. So those teachers need to know more about second language acquisition, about English language learners, than somebody who is not in the classroom with a student at the same time. Specifically, that can mean having an add-on course to the existing curriculum. For example, an ESOL methods course, where the teacher candidates learn how to modify a lesson plan so that accommodations can be made, differentiation of instruction can be made for students at different proficiency levels. At that level of infusion, it is important that the teacher candidate gets to see a practicing teacher already in the field and gets to see what the theory of what they're learning in a methods course or in an infused piece of an already existing other course within the teacher education program, what that looks like in the classroom, how that theory translates into practice. So we recommend that field experiences are part of the infused content in that level. And Dr. Nuta is going to come back to the type of competencies that we think are necessary to be infused at that point.
For programs that wish to provide a credential option for their graduates, as we mentioned before, there are different options in ESOL competencies. One option is the NCATE standards that have been developed in draft form regarding what every mainstream teacher should know pertaining to English language learners. And for content teachers, those competencies are perhaps one of the best goals that we can aspire to and can shape how we put together the curriculum. One way that we can document that students are actually attaining those competencies is to have some sort of an assessment system, which in many places is actually a portfolio or an electronic portfolio, where students will place artifacts that are from content area courses that require them in various assignments to make accommodations for English language learners, to include information about what they've read about English language learners in the work that they submit. And then throughout the program, they accumulate different pieces of evidence that show that they have, in fact, achieved those particular competencies.
The next building block of our schoolhouse is the ESOL Credential 2. That is considered for language arts teachers. With that, we do not mean the English teacher that the public at large thinks about when they think about middle and high school teachers. Of course, these teachers are included. However, we also want to include a pre-kindergarten teacher who works with students on phonemic awareness. We mean elementary school teachers in those very critical years where the students learn to read and write and develop those basic literacy skills that will then later on in the middle school and high school help them learn content as well. Additionally, we're thinking about an exceptional education teacher who works on language skills, at times very intensively, with these students. And all of those teachers do have English language learners in their classes, so they need to know more about language acquisition processes and different stages. And in addition to the methods course that the Credential 1 content teacher would take, we recommend a second course, and that could look like something that we have done in Florida, and that is through a applied linguistics course. So the teacher candidate can learn much more in depth about how the various pieces of linguistics come together in practice with the second language learner. Basically, if you compare the Credential 1 to the Credential 2, we have a lot of similar pieces. That infusion through the 1+, 2+, 3+ framework is the same. You see that, as I mentioned, rather than having one add-on course, which is the methods course only for the content teachers, we have that at the Credential 2 level, but that second applied linguistics course is there in there as well. When it comes to the portfolio, because that language arts teacher has to work on skills development in the linguistics area and the literacy area, we feel it's important to look at the state standards. It could be that a state already has those standards in place. Not all of them do at this point, but there certainly is a trend towards that goal. And as Dr. Nuta mentioned earlier, oftentimes those state ESOL standards are geared towards the ESOL specialist. But it does, of course, then involve all of those language skills and language development type of things that teachers and competencies that teachers need to know. The field experience, again, has got to be a pivotal piece of the process so that the language teacher gets to see how a writing lesson gets implemented, how a piece that they may learn about in the applied linguistics course when they're maybe working on lesson plans for fluency development in reading, how a practicing teacher implements that portion in the classroom. And then, of course, with the field experience would come a reflection that then is placed into that portfolio to show the mastery of the content. Lastly, we recommend that the internship is one where there is at least one portion of it is done in a classroom where there is one or more ELLs, so that rather than only learning about the content in theory first in the classroom, then observing a practicing teacher putting it into place in the classroom, our teacher candidates now get to practice that and implement it with their students when they are in their internship program. So at this point, we have seen the basic coverage for everybody, for every course that leads towards any kind of licensure or teacher certification. We've looked at the content teachers, the kinds of skills and competencies that they need to develop. A step up is the language arts teacher that needs more in-depth, language-concentrated competencies and skills. And then the roof of our schoolhouse is the full ESOL endorsement. And that is for the ESOL specialist, that teacher who works every day with the English language learners and helps those students develop the academic language skills, but also the social language skills that are necessary for a student to become fully included in a mainstream classroom. You see again that we look at that in terms of ESOL Infusion in the 1+, 2+, 3+ framework. We have those same two add-on ESOL specific courses that we have for the content teachers and for the language arts teachers. But we have added now an add-on ESOL specific practicum where those teacher candidates go into either an English language development classroom or into a shelter classroom and have a more in-depth experience with maybe a small group of English language learners, or they may take over a class for a certain period of time. These teacher candidates also show that they are mastering the competencies that are necessary through a portfolio, but we feel that it is important at that time that next to the state standards, of course, that would be required of the ESOL teacher, we also need to take a look at the national TESOL standards that Dr. Nuta mentioned earlier. Both of those really have been geared, and when they were put together, towards the ESOL specialist, so it is only natural that the portfolio would reflect that, and that the kinds of activities and reflections and reading of articles that the teacher candidates do in their coursework are reflected in those state ESOL standards and the TESOL national standards. Same as with the previous two levels, we have field experience that just to see what the theory looks like in practice with a seasoned teacher, where our teacher candidates can observe and learn by then reflecting on maybe how they would have done it, could have done a different piece in there. But where they really take charge later on is in the internship, where they take over a English language development class or a shelter class with the English language learners, where they're really becoming the person who helps the English language learner develop the necessary.
For the infused content in the basic coverage or foundation of the infusion model, all initial certification or licensure degrees may update their curricula. Individual licensure or certification degrees can then decide whether to add the requirement leading to an ESOL credential. Some degrees choose to require all candidates to obtain the ESOL credential, while others have allowed candidates to decide whether to pursue it. Depending on the decision of the degree program and whether or not an ESOL credential is going to be pursued, the particular standards that will be the outcome of the program will vary. Also, at this point, once the standards and the credential have been determined, it's important to survey the faculty and get a sense of their needs and their background in the various ESOL areas that are going to be included in the curriculum. And now we will turn it over to Corinne, who's going to talk about the next step at the course level. And this is going to begin a process of back and forth between pulling the lens out for the curriculum level and then zooming in to the details of the course level. And it is again, back and forth repeated process that continues even until after the curriculum has been established. Corinne?
With the faculty needs assessment that is being done at the curriculum level, the infusion then moves on to really look at the needs of the individual faculty member who is going to be infusing their syllabus with the ESOL content. A faculty member who looks at a 1+ type of course is going to need a different level of mentoring than a faculty member who requires a 2+ or a 3+ infusion. So before I go on any further, I will quickly turn it back over to Dr. Nuta, who can give you more information about what that 1+, 2+, 3+ framework is. It is something she developed about 10-12 years ago and has been using to help programs infuse their syllabi, and it's a simple way of considering what component and what level of infusion is necessary for various courses.
If the schoolhouse represents the infusion of the curriculum and the eventual type of credential that teacher candidates will earn, the 1+, 2+, 3+ framework is really the framing of that schoolhouse. And without the framework, the schoolhouse could not exist. The framework, as Corinne mentioned, is a simple way to begin the process of infusing ESOL content into various courses at the syllabus level. Often faculty, when they embarked on this process of adding content to their courses, didn't know where to get started. So the framework was a result of that confusion and attempted to address that in a simple sequential way. If we think back to the schoolhouse with the notion of the foundation, meaning that the entire teacher education curriculum would include ESOL elements that would be infused into various courses, the framework explains how that's done. Now, the notion behind the framework is that it's additive, and the pluses in between 1, 2, and 3 mean that it doesn't have to be only 1, it can be more than 1, it doesn't have to be only 2, only 3, etc. So at any of these levels in the framework, faculty could choose to do more and are encouraged to do more. The 1+ level is intended for every course in the curriculum that is willing to infuse ESOL content. And typically, the 1+ addition is some reading content or some sort of content, perhaps video content, related to the subject of the course and its connection to English language learners or ESOL methods or second language acquisition. So for example, in a science education methods course, that course would have a 1+ component, which would be a reading on perhaps vocabulary in science and types of sentence structures in scientific texts that might be especially difficult for English language learners. And so the 1+ component in the science course would be satisfied with that reading. With a social foundations course, for example, there might be a specific reading on issues of immigration and how those issues impact schooling and the success of ELLs in their academic endeavors. So that could be, again, through adding a reading, telling students to go visit a website that has information in both text form or video form or whatever other form that they can gather information about the topic of the course and a connection that can be made between the topic of the course and English language learners. In addition, one other example might be a language arts course where they're focusing on developing reading strategies, and then they would be careful to include an article on how to adapt teaching reading strategies for English language learners, how their level of oral proficiency might affect whether or not they could employ a given strategy, or what role their first language might have and their reading skills in their first language on how they employ a reading strategy in the second language. So again, added content can be accomplished in just about any course in the curriculum, and that is what the 1+ indicates. Some courses may stop at the 1+ level. They typically, the types of courses that that only include 1+ kinds of activities are those that do not include a focus on developing curriculum, instruction, or assessment. For courses in those areas, they typically will have assignments in them that ask students to turn in some kind of a original product that they develop. So let's again look at the science methods course. They, in having added their 1+ component, have added an article that explains some of the specific difficulties for ELLs in learning science. And then based on that information that has been provided to the students and additional instruction in the class or in the website of the course, teacher candidates then would be expected in their science lesson plan to include specific modifications for the instruction that they provide to ELLs, as well as the assessment of ELLs in their lesson plan. If it's an assessment course, again, they would need to show in specific assignments how they have made accommodations in the assessments for ELLs. And the same for a course that focuses on curriculum, how to adapt, expand curriculum. The 2+ level is limited to all content areas except language arts. And because language arts bear the burden or privilege, I should say, of helping the English language learners develop their listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills. Teachers, future teachers, teacher candidates in these areas need to know more about how to do that, need to know more about language, need to know more about second language acquisition, and how to support that, not only as in the 2+ courses, which typically are content areas like math and science, social studies, not only how to teach that content and as a secondary endeavor to support the development of the academic language needed to comprehend and express comprehension of that content. In the language arts courses, the real purpose of those courses is to actually teach those language skills and knowledge about language. So they need a deeper level of infusion. So in addition to adding reading content and having assignments where they would adapt curriculum, instruction, and assessment in the areas of language art, they would go more in depth. They would have additional assignments in those areas. They may even have a separate textbook that is part of the course that would involve separate chapters on how to teach listening to ELLs, how to teach speaking, how to teach reading, how to teach writing, and more class discussion, more content in the course website, etc. So language arts is really set apart from the other content areas because it is so language dependent, and that is the major issue that the ELLs need the most support with.
The mentoring process is part of the training that the faculty member is going to need and is going to receive through this process. It is important to remember that at the curriculum level, the determination is made which program is infused and is going to lead to which kind of credential. So the mentoring process needs to be designed so that the mentor can help the faculty member realize whether their course is a 1+, a 2+, or a 3+. That will determine what kind of training in the ESOL content that the faculty member needs to have first, get that background knowledge so that they can infuse the content. There are many different types of resources available for faculty members to learn about ESOL content. This Tapestry website, for example, is one that I highly recommend that mentors move the faculty towards, so they can look at what portions of their syllabi that they're trying to infuse are linked to the topics of, for example, legal precedences or dialectical variations within English that might lead to difficulty for second language learners. Or if it is a 2 or 3+ type of course, then the ESOL strategy workshop would be one of the places where that faculty member may want to get started. In addition to this expert series, of course, there are print-based resources listed on the website and other websites as well. And that is looked at together between the mentor and the faculty member. So there is a back and forth between those. It's not a one-time meeting, here are some resources, now go and do, but it is really an exploring and analysis of the syllabus, at a considering going back to the faculty needs assessment. What is it I already know? What do I need to know to make the infusion meaningful in my course, and then take it from there. The mentor, when working with the faculty member who infuses their syllabus, needs to be cautious of language used in standards or also in conversation between colleagues. Let me give you an example. Maybe a language arts course or a reading course contains an activity that includes a Frye readability scale. The faculty member teaching that course who is asked to infuse ESOL content may automatically think that this is linked to reading development, and therefore feels that this would be one of those assignments that could be then checked off when we're looking at a certain standard. However, the content knowledge of the mentor who comes with a background in second language acquisition or TESOL can help that faculty member understand that when it comes to Frye readability scale, we need to take into consideration the second language learner who might have difficulty with the text because of the vocabulary not being sufficiently developed already to be able to read that portion fluently, and that there are other factors that come into play, not only the same issues that we're looking at for native English speakers with Frye readability. It is also important to keep in mind that the activity by itself and the discussion of issues that are linked to second language learners when it comes to the Frye readability scale are not sufficient to have a truly infused course. It is important to have the students reflect on why it is that this needs to be a piece of consideration in the instruction, or have the students then develop additional exercises where the differentiation may happen for the second language learner in the classroom. The nice thing about having an ongoing communication between the mentor and the faculty member who infuses the course is that he or she, they can make connections between the content of the course and the TESOL content. So once an activity is in place, or once a reading has been chosen and an assessment piece or a reflection piece has been attached to it, the mentor can then help the faculty go back to the standards that are selected by the curriculum level portion of the infusion and say, which standards do you think this is addressing, and are there any other connections that we can make? Is there maybe an additional competency that could be pulled in if we did an additional piece to the puzzle? Once the mentor and the faculty member have decided what standard is being covered by this activity, we can now zoom the lens back out to the curriculum level, at which point we put together a matrix where we decide, is the activity sufficient that the standard is being addressed in a form that the teacher candidate can then move into a portfolio piece where they can show the mastery of that standard? Or is it an activity that addresses ESOL issues, but it's not at the level where it would need to be put into the portfolio? Additionally, this is the point where the standalone course can start to be created. When we have the first draft of the standards that are being addressed, we can start to see where are some holes potentially, or which standards should be addressed an additional 1, 2, or 3 times, and those can become objectives of the standalone course. And now we move back over to the course level where a lot of the fine-tuning will take place.
So as we've seen, we are moving back and forth between curriculum and course level, and at each step of the way we're fine-tuning the curriculum and ensuring that the infused content actually addresses the standards and competencies that have been selected. Often after the mentor has worked with the faculty member in including new activities, the mentor can assist the faculty member with their first attempt at using those activities in class. Sometimes if the institution is lucky enough to have a mentor on site, they could co-teach and co-assess those added ESOL components so that the faculty member who teaches the content area course has that support and begins with the supervision or assistance of an expert in the field. That will lead, of course, to adjustments to the course, to the activities. Sometimes they can collectively create a rubric for the assignment and fine-tune all of that. So also a number of faculty and mentors have tried to calibrate an assignment and a rubric to ensure that they both come up with the same assessment of various students meeting a standard or not. Now again, moving out to the curriculum level, We want to be sure that we include an evaluation component, not only of each individual course and each student within the program, but an overall evaluation of the curriculum of the degree program that leads to the ESOL credential. So we would want to ensure that we are following students throughout their programs, looking at the percentage of students that meet standards at certain points in their programs, in the students' success in their field experiences and internships, and then hopefully beyond their degree to look at their success once they have completed their program. It's been our pleasure to share our experiences with infusing ESOL into teacher education curricula. I'd like to wrap up now by hitting the main points that we've discussed. We began by giving an overview of what ESOL Infusion is. We then moved on to what benefits ESOL Infusion has, what potential it has to better prepare all teacher candidates. After that, we looked at the options of the various standards and competencies that a program might explore as they're trying to determine whether they would like to pursue a given ESOL credential. We also looked at the types of professionals who work with English language learners and discussed how it's more than just the classroom teacher or the ESOL specialist, but there are other important personnel that also need to be prepared to work with English language learners. We spent quite a bit of time looking at the big question of which program should be infused and levels of infusion and credentials. So we looked at the schoolhouse model, and then at the course level we looked at the 1+2+3+ framework that gives some guidance to faculty members who have their content course syllabus and want to know where to start to add ESOL components. And lastly, we looked at the infusion process, which is a back and forth, zooming in and zooming out between the curriculum level and the course level, with an evaluation and assessment component built in at every stage. And of course that continuous improvement and tweaking until we get it perfected. So we hope that you have enjoyed this segment and hope that you take advantage of looking at some of the additional segments that are on this website. Thank you.